very first question is for, all right, great. For those who are considering this approach, the insurance companies, brokers, MGAs, or even an insurtech, what should be their typical starting point to take on this digital insurance middle layer approach?
That's a good question. It varies a little bit by different participants, but I think taking an agile kind of innovation style approach to this makes a great deal of sense. Find a use case that's going to add value, that will prove the value of having this kind of middle layers, middle office, and implement that effectively, right? We heard from Martin earlier that it doesn't need to be expensive. It doesn't need to be a massive investment. But yeah, find a use case, find a problem, solve it with this, and then start. You end up with a good tool there. Start looking for other problems that have similar, would benefit from a similar solution, and keep moving forward from there. I think looking at this as a kind of a boil the ocean exercise where you try to do everything at the same time, that's always a difficult way to implement some of these systems. But Martin, do jump in.
You covered it great, Craig. I mean, I really like the comment about not boiling the ocean. My point of view on this is very similar. Come up with a very discrete use case, something that's going to deliver some business value. It doesn't have to be enormous, but come up with a very discrete use case, be able to, spec out and draw out a timeline when you need to deliver it and when you want to get it done. And then you're able to deliver it via API or through a middle office layer. That's where we've had the best and most success, where we're able to very, hone in on very specific, business problem or business value that you want to capture. And again, start small and then iterate through multiple different steps from there.
All right, great. Thank you.
Awesome.
Moving on to the next question. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go on, Tina. What's the next question?
All right. Okay, we have quite a few, so we have plenty of time too. All right. The next one is how long will it take for a middle layer solution implementation and integrations with the back office core systems?
Shall I take a stab at that one first, and then you can give some practical examples there, Martin?
Sure.
It really depends, right? So I've seen people implement this kind of solution over a relatively modern system that already has some kind of API, like a SOAP API, or maybe even a RESTful API, but it's just not quite what the insurer needs. And that can be relatively quick, actually, to implement these kinds of solutions over that. I've also seen folks looking at old systems written in COBOL, I-90 style systems, IS 400, and that's much tougher. And that's where people start looking at more fluffy fluffy ways of doing the integration, perhaps getting even robots to drive some of the screens where they can't get to the functionality they're looking for. And obviously that can take longer as well. So there's a little bit of how long is a piece of string, and that it depends on the complexity of the back office system and actually with the use case as well. But typically it can be quite quick. But Martin, I mean, you had some great case studies there. You've probably got some good figures, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think, again, coming up with a very discrete use case and then, time boxing it. We've done 8 weeks where that was for a minimal viable product. We rolled those products out to 15 states. But then we subsequently pulled in the automated API integrations in subsequent phases. And so that's how we're able to do those much quicker. I would say we're able to do in, let's say, 4 to 6 weeks, very specific APIs to the newer technologies that are out there, which you see in many of the insurtechs that are offering or third-party services, or many of, let's say, the traditional insurance services are offering more and more via RESTful API. And that's where we can deliver those very quickly, 4 to 6 to 8 weeks, deliver you that capability. And then over time, you'll, if you have more older legacy back office systems, you can create, more robust integrations into that back office. But again, in integrating very quickly to integrate into the newer technologies. And again, looking at anything that's out in the cloud, offering on AWS or Azure in their marketplaces or in their services, we can do very quickly in a matter of weeks.
Excellent.
And I think that's one of the biggest advantages of this approach, faster implementation.
Exactly.
Right. Great,
I mean,
thank you. Go ahead.
But just as far as integration, particularly with the newer technologies or third-party ecosystem vendors, the first question we'll ask is where are your API specs and where can we connect to your test environments? And they'll do the same to us, and we provide our API specs and they provide their API specs, and we basically start connecting right away and opening up into their development environments. And that's typically how that's starting to work. And it works very rapidly. That like we have the technology to support, they'll have technologists to support their integrations, and we can do it very rapidly.
Cool.
Right, great, thank you. Cool. So as a continuation of this, is this approach equally beneficial irrespective of the size and scale of the organization? It is one of the questions, of course, that's been asked. So, irrespective whether it's a regional, local company, be it insurance carrier, broker, MGA, InsurTech, should the benefits experienced, derived, be consistent across the board?
Ooh, that's an interesting one. I think there's a broad set of use cases here, right? So we talked about a variety of those. So, for instance, you're an MGA, you've got an older system, but you want to take advantage of, say, something that's very good at underwriting triage or bordereau management, something that's a problem for your business, takes a lot of time from your people, and there's a clear direct business benefit to that. I think there's a broader, so you get that kind of use case, that small business benefit case there, but there's a broader capability discussion to be had here about being able to, once you have something like this in play, where you can start to talk to, as Martin was just describing, just go to an InsurTech or go to a data provider, go to somebody who's offering a service and ask them for their API and just start plugging it in and start trying it out. That opens up a new level of capability. That means that actually you can go to a different InsurTech every month, integrate them quickly, see whether that adds value. If it doesn't, you haven't lost a great deal. If it does, it's in your ecosystem now, it's in your library. You move on and you do the next one. So there's this sort of almost multiple layers of and this combinatorial explosion of benefit that you can derive from adopting this. But really start out small, prove it with a simple use case, start to learn what you can do with the capability, and then you can grow from there. But Martin, I'm sure you've got some numbers around this as well.
Right. I mean, from our perspective, again, I think you hit it on the head, Craig. It really runs a really broad spectrum of use cases or case studies. We're talking a lot now about starting small and building over time, but we've actually worked with a large $5 billion carrier in Asia to rationalize all their existing policy administration and digital capabilities onto InsurMo and Digital Core. And they basically pulled all their legacy applications and put them on the Digital Core and then exposed them in various different channels for using the InsurMo capabilities. And basically, because they're a multi-line carrier, they had different channels and affinity partners and approaches to selling. And while they use one large Digital Core, the channels at which they connect to vary greatly. And so that's where the middle office enabled them to have a lot of agility and treat motor different than personal accident, then different than small middle market insurance for commercial customers. We do that all the way down to the InsurTech startup scenario that you saw. They had a minimal amount of funding, but they had a very innovative idea, and we were able to give them a proof of concept. The key thing around that proof of concept is it's not just a proof of concept. Once they decide to scale and go live with their products, they can actually turn the switch and turn that on and actually sell insurance at scale. I like to tell people that if you're looking to launch a new product line within your company, that's often a use case that we get. We're the quickest path in between sort of idea to scale, and we can launch those products very quickly.
That's great. That's a pretty powerful statement from idea to concept, especially in the context of digital transformation and innovation. So that's great. Thank you. Thank you to both of you. Following up with our next question, the technology stack spans a range of process domains, customer digital journey, insurance microprocesses, that includes issue code, convert code to policy, etc. I think this is more for Martin, I guess, but the question is, what system owns the process? Is it the legacy core? It's the eBao core? Is it the middle layer, the front-end app?
Typically, from our perspective, if you're exposed, depending on your use case, it ends up being that middle office layer versus the core layers that really facilitate the product configuration, the rating and the rules, and then interactions with your affinity partner, digital channel, whether that's a mobile app, your website, your mobile app, or a third-party website or mobile app. But it typically then becomes the InsureMo middle office that's the control point.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Is that how you? Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I'll jump in there if that's all right.
That's all right.
Part of the issue is, I remember when we started to get a few channels, right, like contact center, agents, web, and you could manage that. But now it's just this plethora of digital channels, and the logic's got to go somewhere. And historically, it went in the core, but now we're starting to see folks leveraging their core, leveraging a partner's API, leveraging an InsureTech capability, and you have to have that orchestration somewhere, and it typically lifts up out of the core into this middle layer. But yeah, you don't want to have those kind of processes being owned in front of the API. You'll be replicating them everywhere.
With respect to that, depending on how long you've been in the industry, we started off as like looking to expose policy administration systems direct to consumer. Then we wanted to go multi-channel, and then we called it omni-channel. And really, over the time, the technology has really continued to advance and really taken us to where we are, and we'll call it an ecosystem. And I would say it truly is the ecosystem approach today, because the technology is really advanced or caught up to the concept of distributing through as many channels as potentially possible, and you really lower the cost to distribute, connect to those channels, and it makes it economically viable to sell through that. Whereas I would say before really the advent of cloud microservices, we really sort of had to take the 80-20 rule, and that, we really had to go look at those channels where 80% of the business was generated, and the cost of integration with those channels was so high that, we focused on those, and then we didn't have any of these other channels.
Yep.
So again, the cloud technologies have brought that cost of connecting down dramatically.
That's correct. Yes. Well, thank you for that. I think this has been covered through some of the questions, but it'll be helpful to bring it all together through one question that we have. What challenges do you usually face by integrating the middle layer solution with the back office core system? Craig or Martin, either of you.
Challenges, I think, and actually the previous question kind of covered some of this. You start getting into some interesting questions around domains of responsibility. So what do you want the middle layer to be doing? What do you want the core back office system to be doing? And then you've got some of those other challenges we were talking about in terms of actually technically, how do you tell the back office to do something, that core system to do something, and then when it's done it, how do you get the result out of that system? Sometimes that can be non-trivial. So yeah, there's a couple of issues there. Which one is responsible for it, and which one's owning it, mastering that capability, and then which one, and then actually the practicalities of doing that integration. Would you have anything else, Martin?
No, I think you covered it pretty well there. I think it sort of comes down to the age of the technology that's on your back end. Typically, the older it is, I would say you probably delegate more of your control into the middle office. You get into some challenges when it's kind of not as old, and then you want to determine where you want to put the points of control.
Yeah.
And and then there's a number of different factors that can drive where you put that point of control. Scalability, flexibility, agility, whether you actually do have that in your back office systems.
Great. Thank you. We're almost at top of the hour. We'll try and fit in 2 more questions.
Excellent.
This question is, my new pass comes with an API. Can't I just use that? Do I need a middle office if I have a reasonably new core system?
I think there's a really interesting thing that's happening in the insurance industry at the minute, where the entities in the insurance industry are starting to differentiate themselves in the market through their API. So historically, it used to be through your agent network, and then we got into the .com era, and it was through your website and how easy you were to work with. But now actually the API is part of that differentiation. It's the face of the organization. So just taking whatever comes for free with whatever you've bought recently feels like it's at odds with that. If you have a look at things like studio.chub, some of the APIs that parts of the Access Lab have put out there, we could talk about Liberty Mutual and a bunch of the other insurers out there that are starting to really push out their APIs and differentiate through that. Martin, what's your view? Would you just take the API that came with your core?
Our digital core, definitely you can take again, our digital core is built on the same microservices and all the APIs and capabilities that are, the foundation is InsureMo. So again, we basically will offer hundreds of granular level APIs. Again, like I said, not just rate, quote, bind. And then not only can you expose a quote or bind, but also, like I said, you could create your own customer journeys. So you can expose many different granular APIs and services, open to that front office or exposed front end to the distribution channel. And again, it all depends on, if you do have a RESTful API, it depends on how you're running it in your infrastructure, whether it's cloud-based and, fully scalable versus more geared towards your traditional back office type transaction processing. Again, from our perspective, if you launch it, even if you use our digital core, if you launch your API on the InsureMo platform, you can run APIs for combined small middle market commercial insurance, which is a relatively low transactional volumes, but you can also, let's say, do very high quoting, hundreds of thousands per hour, if you will, with a very low bind rate. And that requires a different infrastructure footprint. So again, we know from our perspective, again, that's what I said, we're more than enterprise scalable, we're internet scalable. So we have one client again where we've done well over 50 million transactions in a single day. Granted, a number of those were probably of 50 million, 40 were microservice transactions, but 5 to 10 million were probably what we consider standard insurance products, personal accident, home, mobile phone warranty.
Right. So almost at the top of the hour. We'll take one last question before we sign off. I do understand people have hard stop. Can you just talk about the cost implications of this approach relative to the time taken to implement? And I think more so it becomes relevant when there's a legacy play here, when people are dealing with their legacy. Is it more cost effective with this approach, or maybe not?
I'll do a short 30 seconds then. There is value from replacing a very old legacy system, or even kind of a modern legacy system that's 20 years old, with new technology. But you spend a lot of your time migrating things and actually not adding new functionality, right? You're getting back to the position you were in before you started to do the replacement. So you spend a lot of effort getting back to where you were, and then you can start to increase that speed. And I think and putting in a middle office, particularly where you've got those small use cases, you want to start innovating, getting that test and learn behavior and that new culture. you can just get up and running quicker.
Right. I would say if we go back sure. If we go back to, I think you hit on a good point on new culture. You can sit, I think Dougie Kennedy brought that up in his first webinar, and really taking this middle office approach and microservices, they had to bring in a different mindset and a different culture to deliver the programs, kind of make them into smaller, more discrete projects, but also tie them to very specific business value. And then that's the key thing. And so in that respect, it can be very cost effective because you're doing, small pieces in short sprints and delivering discrete business value and showing results. And then from an IT perspective, you're showing results to the business that you can deliver on this technology works.
That's great. Absolutely. I think that should be music to everybody's ears. Delivering quick value. Well, with this, we do come to the end of this webinar. We really hope all of you found this useful. Thank you again for joining us for this conversation. If you have any questions for Craig, Martin, or me, our email IDs are right here. You can always drop us a note. I will share the video recording of this with you, so look out for that email. And thank you again for joining us today. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Martin, for bringing it together. And everybody, thank you. Stay safe and take care.